So you've had that moment of clarity, the need to change moment. Maybe it came in a quiet time of reflection, or maybe it hit like lightning, like a lightning bolt in the middle of a bad day. Either way, you're now wondering, can I actually change? Like, really? Isn't life already boxed in by all the stuff we can't control? Society's expectations, our health, money worries, even the weather or a broken bus system. Spiritual paths, whether through meditation, prayer, mindfulness or reflection, often ask us to make conscious choices. And those choices, they only work if we have that inner freedom to say yes or no. Emanuel Swedenborg, the spiritual philosopher, said this freedom comes from our ability to understand what's generally good and true. Sometimes our feelings want something quick and easy, but our heads, when we're listening, say, that's not the best move long term. It's like having a mental traffic light helping us pause when we feel we want something and think about what we actually need. You get to decide which fleeting thoughts you let stay and which ones you send packing. Now, gaining insight is awesome, but insight alone won't carry you across the finish line. Knowing isn't the same as doing. You've got to follow through. If you spend all day being selfish or dishonest, it's pretty hard to sit down later and expect your meditation to feel peaceful. As teacher Jack Cornfield once pointed out, you can't meditate your way out of being a jerk. Remember that old biblical parable? A man throws a feast, invites a bunch of people, but they all have excuses for not turning up. I bought some land. I've just got married. I've got cattle to check out. So he invites everyone else instead. He invites the overlooked and the outcast. The message? We all get invitations to grow, to nourish our spirit, but we are the ones who choose whether we show up or stay stuck in excuses. If we don't use our inner strengths, our sense of right and wrong, our talents, we risk losing them. That's what it means by not showing up at the feast, because the feast represents our spiritual nourishment that we really need. Now, that gut feeling to be kind, to do better, to forgive, if we ignore it enough, it fades into the background noise and we become spiritually starving. Now, here's some relief. Having a wild or selfish thought isn't a crime. Acting on it, that's what matters. We can't help everything that pops into our head, but we can decide which thoughts we give a voice to. Look, guilt and shame, they've been overused in religion and culture for centuries. But beating yourself up for every random thought or old habit isn't the answer. It's not about denying what's in your mind. It's about not identifying with every impulse. Real spiritual growth doesn't come from pretending to be perfect. It comes from being self-aware and willing to try again. We all flip between good and not so great behaviour. One moment generous, the next selfish. That's being human. But what makes the difference is self-awareness. Taking time to look at what we've been thinking, what we've been feeling and doing. Emanuel Swedenborg believed that when we are focused only on material stuff, money, comfort, holidays, status, we lose touch with our own deeper reasoning. We get caught up in surface level thinking. But if we pause and reflect, we can tap into a deeper reasoning part of ourselves, a higher part of ourselves, the wiser voice inside us that keeps the big picture in mind. Remember the story of the son who wasted his inheritance and ended up broke, feeding pigs? He could have been self-righteous, blaming others for his plight. He could have demanded his family position back. But he had a wake-up call. He asked himself, what am I doing with my life? And this led him back to his father, who welcomed him with open arms. No judgment, just celebration. Now that story hits deep because it's all about all of us. We mess up, we get off track, we ignore our better instincts. But when we finally face the music with honesty and a touch of humility, we open the door to real change. Swedenborg says that if our bad intentions were hidden, they would not surface, and we would not see them, and therefore not admit to them. Consequently, we would not be in a position to resist them. Facing our own flaws is hard. It's uncomfortable, but it's also necessary. The recognition that we need to change in order to grow spiritually, it's not an easy discovery. We can be very resistant and sometimes need to learn the same lessons time and time again before we are willing to accept them. And you've got to do the self-assessment with kindness. That kind fatherly energy, welcoming, loving, forgiving. Not like the prodigal son's brother, but like his father. This is how we're meant to look at ourselves, not with shame, not with anger, but with courage. Swedenborg saw that kind of love as coming from a higher source, something bigger than us, but also something in us. A divine compassion that sees the potential in everyone. Over time, the more we act out certain attitudes, anger, pride, greed, then the more they stick. They become second nature. That's why change takes effort. It's not about being perfect. It's about noticing those old habits, those old patterns, and gently saying, "Not today." Swedenborg even talked about how we tune in to certain spiritual vibes, sort of like aligning with different communities of thought. The more we feed a mindset, the more we attract similar energies. So yes, breaking old patterns, it's a bit of a spiritual workout. Real personal change is in the detail. Altering the way we relate to others can be the biggest game changer. It points out us, a little of our own ego bubble. Whether it's being less judgmental, more inclusive, or simply pausing before jumping to conclusions, these small shifts matter. Now, you may remember another biblical story. I've mentioned the biblical story of the prodigal son, but here's another one. It's about the two banquets. Do you remember that one? At one banquet, everyone insisted they were the most important person there. Actually, come to think of it, this wasn't a Bible story. No, I've got it all wrong. It was actually a non-Bible story from a Buddhist tradition. I think it was a Buddhist tradition, certainly an Eastern tradition. Anyway, it was about two banquets. At one, everyone insisted they were the most important person there and ended up going hungry because they couldn't use the extra long spoons that were provided as cutlery. They couldn't use them to feed themselves. But at the second banquet, everyone said the person next to them were more important. And so they used their spoons to feed each other. Everybody ate. Now that's the power of humility and generosity. It's not about thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And finally, what fuels all this? What gets us unstuck? What gets us back on track, growing again? Well, I'm sure you would agree the answer is love. Not the fuzzy, romantic kind of love, but the gritty, compassionate, helping kind of love in action. It's like the Good Samaritan story from the Gospel, where someone goes out of their way at their own expense to help a stranger in need. That's real love. It doesn't always look convenient, but it's what transforms lives, ours included. Oh yes, change is hard, but it is also possible, and it starts small, with noticing, choosing, trying again, with humour, humility, and a whole lot of love. We are not alone in this journey, and we've got what it takes. No excuses needed.